For more stories like these, go to www.social-tv.co.za, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on our social mediums.
There was over 35,149 new domains that were registered around the back-to-school theme the past 3 months. 512 of them were found to be malicious, with another 3,401 suspicious. The average number of suspicious domains per week at the peak time was 356, which of course far exceeds the traditional scary number of 115 the previous weeks. What am I talking about? That's the amount of websites that's been set up to try and invade your space. So how do we protect our kids from security threats as they go back to school? We're gonna find out from Pankaj Bhula, who is from a security company called Checkpoint. You're listening to our social newscast with me, Sam Marshall, brought to you by www.social-tv.co.za. Please talk to me about how do we protect our kids from security threats?
There are a number of do's and don'ts that we recommend, and I think it's not only for students but certainly for parents in this day and age. Simple, basic ones. So cover your webcam. I think a lot of people leave that open. I'm just going to take you through a few of those simple ones, if that's okay with you. Click on a trusted source rather. So you find a lot of people directly go to websites from emails that they receive from untrusted sources. So we would absolutely recommend that children do not do that, and parents guide children accordingly. Log directly into the websites that you've been asked to log on. There's a lot of online learning platforms. Certainly don't do that from another website. But the most basic, and I've seen that even with my children, the passwords used are very simple. Implement strong best practice kind of password methodologies. And it's said, but I see people sharing confidential information about themselves, their user ID, their passwords. Children do that a lot too. So we would definitely encourage that people do not do that. Some do's and don'ts or other good things for parents. There are things that you can implement on many of these online tools or even in your own environment at home with regards to software, parental controls. So put that in place. If you find that your child is being cyberbullied, or please reach out to the parents. Some people we've seen people not do that, and unfortunately that has really gone out of control. And they're very common at the moment, and it's not even just on the online platforms, but even within companies and on a global scale. A huge increase in phishing, or let's call it a malware, type targeted text. So be very, very careful of those and the ransomware related type scenarios where people are holding individuals to account, and because they've got information about those individuals or details of those individuals which they shouldn't have had.
At Checkpoint, have you guys looked at the I don't know if it's a silly question, but
No problem.
have you looked at the psychology of the hacker? Do you guys understand the psychology? Is it just criminality, the way you would see fraud, the way you would see murder? Is this somebody who's wired completely differently?
No, and it's funny you asked that, Sam. In fact, I was on a radio interview with Radio Islam a few weeks ago, and a lot of people, in fact, reached out to myself and certainly our company, and I spoke about three fundamental reasons why individuals as well as companies are being breached. And if you allow me to answer that, and then we'll talk about the one is, funny enough, in South Africa, we have a huge culture of being security conscious. Even in our homes, we've got walls, dogs, and burglar guards and alarm security inside, outside. So we have a culture. And so we're very conscious about these things. But yet, in South Africa is currently now being cyber breached 3 times faster than on a global scale that's taking place in other countries. So we're not implementing that kind of culture in our online practices. Jumping onto our website, bank accounts. We surprisingly are very weak there. So the culture needs to be addressed. Now, number two, best practices. So there's so many best practices about, and I used one earlier where I spoke about passwords, capital, but people still use their dogs' names or their birthdays or things like that. So we certainly struggling, and that's common not only in South Africa, but I think also across the rest of the continent. My company, we're across the continent. And lastly, the amount of money that we spend. So we'll spend we'll cut corners and we'll buy technology or solutions even for your home, which is probably not up to standard. It definitely has gaps. There are quite a few companies in the recent in South Africa that I'm sure you're aware of. So when you cut corners, this is where you expose yourself. So coming back to the hacker or the psyche of a hacker, the psychology of the hacker is that they always want to win. Their goal is to breach. And as South Africans, and as in terms of where we are right now, we are making it a lot more easier for them to do that. Now, the makeup of a cyber criminal is not necessarily a computer fundi programmer. It could be any other person that has the ability to obviously, convince someone to provide them with their information online, which they wouldn't have normally.
With all due respect to you, sir, you're an expert. This is what you eat, sleep, breathe, you and your colleagues. You guys talk about some of these latest breaches, and obviously the hackers, these criminals are becoming smarter, so you guys are on top of that. But when I read this press release, I was completely shocked. I mean, just listen to the stats. There was over 35,149 new domains that were registered around the back-to-school theme. That's in the past 3 months. 512 of them were found to be malicious and another 3,401 suspicious. How the hell do I, as a layman, even begin to look for the signs of what is an actual back-to-school website, a website that's actually promising me advice? And meanwhile, at the back end, there are these coders, these hackers, we have this idea of this really fat guy sitting in his mom's basement. How do we even begin to understand what is real and what isn't real?
Yeah, Sam, it's so always go to a legitimate site. So never click on a link from an email of some sort. So type the actual URL or the web name in the actual site. So I mean, let's use one example. In fact, I was researching quickly. There are tools like LearnPress. You're familiar with that, right? I think if you read through the article, Sam, you would have seen that that's just one of those. I would go directly to the LearnPress site and log on to that website as opposed to jumping onto it via an email or some sort of a text or a WhatsApp that has been sent on a group that everybody would be on. That's the simplest way to avoid having those kind of potential breaches.
Can I push back a little? Because
sure, no worries.
I want to ask this question because there's something else that, as you giving us this advice, now I know this for a fact. It's only recently that I started checking the URL domain. I know FNB a while ago even released an email saying that if you see this URL, that's not us. We are https / something. Majority of us don't even look at the URL. We just see the first word FNB and then we click. We don't.
Absolutely.
We're not educated around what URLs look like.
Yeah. And this is the thing, Sam. People say we need to be educated, but it's not. It's to some extent, that when you leave your home, you need to ensure that your doors are locked. When you reach a certain traffic light at the late part of the evening in South Africa, it's sad. I mean, we live in an environment but you should be very, very cautious. Look around you, and if you can, drive away with caution. That's exactly the similar culture that needs to be adopted when you are working online or using online tools. It's basics. Simple passwords are also a challenge. It's a basic that we need to implement, or we need to educate each other, and certainly, parents to children and teachers to children as well. in this particular example. Coming back to your domain comment, right? Sam, this is a stat on the back to school, but during the COVID period, those numbers were exorbitant as well, because if you recall, there were all these COVID relief packages that were being implemented by governments around the world. There were thousands and thousands of those sites that were suspicious, malicious, and unfortunately, people became victims of it. And a simple example would be, instead of a zero for a O for COVID, the hacker would create a site which would be C0. And so when you receive it in an email or on a WhatsApp or a SMS, you click on it because it's quite easy. Meanwhile, it's going to a website which is insecure and breaching your content when you've plugged in your username and password or anything else.
Yeah, but you're asking us, Pankaj, to use your analogy. When I leave my home, I exit out of one point, lock the door, look around me, and then climb in my car. Here you're asking us to watch your front, your back, your side 24/7. Because there's no way that I can tell you for free, I would not have spotted the difference between the 0 and the O. I wouldn't have.
Yes.
And then you're also saying that in this world at the moment, it's not just a hacker, but you've got to be worried about your child being cyber bullied. You've got to be worried about Zoom bombing. You've got to be worried about so much stuff. My question is, how do we streamline it for those that don't know? How do we streamline it for the herd?
Sure. Look, obviously, we need to provide as much awareness and education as possible, and that is probably something that we can do more of as corporate users or companies that are in this domain. I've provided some level of training to my children in their school, to their classes. So I think a lot of that can be done. But I also believe, and just while I don't necessarily want to promote the company, but the organization I work for and many others similar to us, we have technologies that one can use on their mobile devices, on their laptops. Many years ago, people spoke about things called antivirus, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, Sam. That was when, yeah. So there are technologies, not necessarily, but technologies today that allow you to do, to protect you against anti-phishing or anti-malware. And therein is where we probably can also add some value and educate, users and companies on what are the best practices that can be used.
If people want to get hold of you, where can they go? And obviously they've got to, when they put in your URL, they've got to make sure that it's an actual C. Where can people go? How can they get hold of you?
Yeah, so very easy. If everybody's comfortable with email, my name, which is PANKAJB at Checkpoint, and Checkpoint is one word, so it's CHECKPOINT.com. It's a .com, not a .co.za. And more than happy to even receive phone calls if people are more comfortable with that. And my mobile number, Sam, is 082-862-2902.